Alright, welcome back everybody! So today I want to talk about the timer mechanics. So to begin, let's get some design goals. So thinking about it, if we're playing this game with 10 teams and 4 players on each team, realistically each team would have either their own world or dimension isolated from the other teams. And we would use the same seed over and over for each team to generate the same tomb for each team. But if we're going to use information from a scoreboard system or storage, I think it would be best to identify that data by the structure that was generated that needs it. In other words, when I generate a structure, I want that to be a completely enclosed system so that if I generate another tomb structure somewhere else in the world, that doesn't affect what has already been generated, and what has already been generated doesn't affect the newly generated tomb as well, vice versa. It goes both ways. So data is identified by each tomb, everything is isolated to that one system. I think the easiest way to do this is just by coordinates. So in the timer structure as is right now, I've actually reserved a little space of air. It's just 1 block high, right below the timer for any kind of command blocks that we're gonna use to run the game. I also have a little space at the top of the timer, just in case if I needed it. We may not need it, I don't think we will, but it's there just in case. So down here, again, we'll have some kind of command block that acts as like our anchor. And so we'll have a scoreboard over here for how much time is remaining in the game. And so we'll say that the tomb that has generated at these coordinates has, we'll go with 2 minutes, so 120 seconds to start off with. And then if we generate another structure somewhere else, it wouldn't affect how much time is left in this first game. This one can be running independent of another structure tomb generated somewhere else in the world. So we'll also need another command block down here that will run a function every second of the game to check for certain parameters and make sure things are running properly. Okay, so let's think about this. This function that will run here will have to update any kind of like scoreboard values. And we'll also want to animate this sand down. I know I talked about that in a previous video, and so that is something that we want to have in the game. And there's a couple other things that we'll need to do. But before we get to those, I want to talk about what happens when the player tries to add sand into the timer. So as we've seen before, there's a little like composter at the bottom that the players can try to click to place sand on. And there's really only 2 things that could happen when they try to add sand into the timer. Either the timer is full, and so we don't allow them to place the sand in, or there will be some space here, and so in that case we will allow them to add sand into the timer. So if they add sand, obviously we need to add 10 seconds into their time, and then I think it would be best to add sand into a queuing system instead of feeding it directly into the timer when the player adds sand. This way we can just increment the queue, and then on our clock system we can add that sand from the queue when we're ready for it. So over here we'll have another scoreboard, and same way we just identify each tomb by their coordinates so that each tomb has its own queue system. Okay, so back here, if we have a full timer and we cannot place sand in the timer, we just need to give the sand that they placed back to the player. And then obviously we'll want to do some like sound effects for each of these options and the daunting gong noises in our function here. And one last thing, we'll need to check for the game end, whether that be all the players were able to escape or the time ran out, and then handle that accordingly. Now, just looking at everything, I already know that the trickiest part is going to be animating the sand that we add from the queue from the top of the timer and having it fall to line up with the rest of the sand already in the timer. As this stuff is animating slowly down, we don't necessarily know how far we want this block, this new block of sand that they just added in, to fall down. I mean, theoretically, technically we do. It's just a little tricky. I don't have the math figured out in my head yet. And we're gonna run into some limitations with our goal here, actually. So based off of how scoreboards can be displayed on the sidebar, you can display them by teams. So I think that if we have a game right here if X and Z coordinates 1, X1 and Z1 running, and say their team blue bats. That means that any other tomb that is running right now as well cannot be that same team. It would have to be some other team. But that should be fine. I don't know, maybe I don't need to worry about it too much. Maybe we should just actually start placing blocks down. All right, we got it, everyone. So remember in the last episode where I said that I totally accidentally deleted a lot of the files for the data pack? Yeah, so the files I mentioned earlier in this video were some of those files. But not to fear, I was able to recreate everything, and I think it's a little different from what I had before, but it seems to be okay. So let's check it out. I know one of these corners has what I'm looking for. Oh my gosh, it's this one. Okay, cool. So in this corner, we just have your basic redstone clock here. And then we have a redstone block hooked up to a piston that will be extended after the pre-game stuff. Now, I don't have that completely put in place just yet. So for now, I can just, yoink this block right here whenever I want. And then that will trigger this command every second, which will run the function 1 second. Now this runs in a very specific position, and that position is actually immediately under the timer, right where that glass block is. That is dead center. But it runs that function with data from a different block off in this corner. Now I put this block in the corner here because I didn't know if I could put it in the center. I thought it would be like in the way, but I think I can actually move this to the center. I think it would just be best to have this be in the center of the timer instead of a random glass block, because this is the anchor block. So this one is an impulse command block, and it's always active. So as soon as I generate a tune, this block will execute its function. And what this function does is it sets up some scoreboard values using the coordinates of this command block. So we can see the first thing that it does is it sets the time remaining score for this tomb to 141, which is actually overfilled. So when the players start the game, the timer is actually overfilled by a bit. So if I do scoreboard, objectives, set display, sidebar, time remaining, we can see the coordinates, the X and Z coordinates for this command block, and the score associated with this tomb. So now if I fire up the system, we can see this clock is running and executes this command every second, which is animating all these display blocks down. And you can see that creepily inching its way closer down and down as we go. I'm also playing a sound every 10 seconds. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. Let me be quiet for a second. Yeah, so you heard that. So that plays every 10 seconds. And then down here, I have a system on each side for when the player tries to add sand. So I have a couple of repeating command blocks, and I'll probably hook these up to some redstone for when the game is running here, just like I did for our puzzle, our red key puzzle room. And so it basically just checks if there's a block of red sand above the composter? I don't know, whatever it's called. And then it tries to replace that block of red sand with air. If it is successful, it also will trigger this chain command block, which will call the function to run all the logic that we went over on the whiteboard. And so we can see those conditions. So if the score for this timer is within allotted range of 1 to 119. Then we play a sound saying that we can't add the sand, and then we'll return out of this function by lastly giving them a block of red sand. On the other hand, if this condition is not met, then we go to these three commands, and this is where we add sand to the queue and then add 10 seconds to their time. So let's take a look at that. So the timer is getting creepily low, so if I add a block of sand, you can hear a little clicking noise. I don't know if you guys heard that. Let me be quiet when I do it. You can hear it that time. And then I can add a bunch of sand. So let me actually go in creative and just give myself a whole stack of this stuff. So once we hit a certain point with our time score, we are no longer able to add more sand, and we pull one block off the sand queue every second and animate it down. And this is a quick look at that function that executes every second. We got a weird thing going on here on line 6. First, I just want to draw your attention to this command right here, scoreboard players add. So we have a scoreboard called empty time, and that basically keeps track of how much empty space there is in the timer. And so this command actually returns what the score for this player, or our tomb for this instance, will be for this scoreboard objective after we've added this value. And this part, execute store result, will actually take the result of what this guy spits back and save it to storage. And then in the storage, we're saving it to this location under this path. And we're storing it as a float, and we're scaling it by 10. So every second, we teleport the sinking sand blocks down by 0.1 of a block. But you can't store float values in a scoreboard, so that's why we're doing this math here with this command to save it to storage. And so what is stored here is really how much we're going to teleport a sand block down when we need to pull it off the queue. And that's actually being used in this TP sand down function. All this function does is just teleport it down by this amount. I do have a scoreboard for gong sounds. I needed this to be able to run scoreboard operations for understanding when it was appropriate to play a gong sound, because we need to play it every 10 seconds, right? So that's what some of these things are doing. I also play one when there's only 15 seconds left in the game. I think that's how the regular game of Sands of Time does it. It's a slightly different sound. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. I could easily change this to something else. And then here, for the final 10 seconds, we run a gong sound every second. So if I let this sand drop down here, we have 20 seconds left. And then 15 seconds. Now we're gonna get down to the final stretch. You can hear the gong playing every second, and I can add sand with just a second left if I can get there. Yep, so, and then the sand animates down. It comes flying down. It's kind of funny, actually. But let's say I'm out of sand, and I'm running out of time as well. What will happen is we'll see the message, game over appear. So I don't have that fully implemented here. I still need to check if all team members have escaped, and then run some function that will take care of cleanup or whatever. Alrighty, so it's been a while since I've recorded here. I'm sorry, I've been really busy in real life. And I've also been hitting a major speed bump here with a stinky bug that has been persistent all the way up till just last week with either a pre-release or a release candidate, one of the two. The bug affected the pick block feature of Minecraft. So if I hold control and I middle click with my mouse, you see that I get a jigsaw block. So it's a copy of whatever block I was looking at with all the MBT data stored in it. So if we open this up, you can see different information here that I've edited. And so this block here has that exact same information, except for it may or may not, because the bug was actually duplicating the data. So if I do /data get block, and then I do for the coordinates of the block that I'm looking at, you could see it has this component section and blah, 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 blah. And then in here it has, joint rollable, name, blah, 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 pool, blah, blah, blah. That's the exact same as stuff after this component section. So we see joint rollable, name, blah, 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 pool, blah, blah, blah. So it's duplicate data. But what I was doing is I would control pick block and then place the block down and then edit this maybe a little bit, blah, 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 hit done, and then control pick block that block. So now it should have different MBT data, but it didn't. So I was getting very frustrated. The only way that I would be able to edit everything is if I manually place them all down and then copy paste the strings for each of these. And I was not about to do that. So over here I have a fixed version of a jigsaw block. So if I do data get block blah blah blah, you can see this only has one copy of the data that's supposed to have. This is the correct version. This is the incorrect version. And so I've been waiting for that bug to get fixed so I can fix all of these jigsaw blocks, finally. Yay! Now I don't want to focus on all this stuff here on this episode. I want to save it for next episode because it's really part of a bigger system in play for how the dungeon or the tomb generates. But the basic idea is that this all is a byproduct for customization. Essentially, I want to have different difficulty levels that you can choose from when generating a tomb. And there's two parts that affect the difficulty level. The type of vaults and keys that generate in the tomb. Some vaults are a little more user-friendly, and the size of the tomb. So I want to be able to customize how big the tomb generates. Yeah, so next episode's going to be a really technical episode, so get ready to put on your hard hats. But that's it from me for now. I've got a lot of work to do, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye!